South, excuse me. She attended South Dakota State University for horticulture. And after graduating, she worked for the state of South Dakota as their urban forestry coordinator, helping the communities through grants and programming. And so after being with South Dakota for 5 years, she joined PlanITGeo as a software customer and then joined PlanITGeo team in 2021. So with that, I'm sure she has quite a bit to share. I think this is a pretty robust platform, and I'm really excited to hear it. So welcome, Rachel. And with that, I'm going to shut up and turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Sean and Henry. It's really great to be here today. And I just want to give props to those of you on this call because it is a Friday before a long weekend and you're still here listening. I'm sure some of you, when you heard, I actually live in South Dakota, went to school here, a lot of my experiences here. But I do want to tell you that I've been working with Florida communities essentially the whole time that I've been at PlanITGeo. So first couple of years, I was on our consulting team, which works more on strategic management planning and ordinance reviews, things like that. And then a year in, I decided I guess I'd go to the dark side. And so I am on the sales team and I give demos of our software every day and ultimately try to make folks like yourselves make your lives easier when it comes to managing trees or even just green assets in general. And so today I want to tell you a little bit more about our company. And then honestly, I'm going to get into just what do you call it? Play by play with the demo and see what questions you have. And I do want to say hi to some of the folks that I've seen come in for this webinar because I know some of us have met before. So really good to see you. I'm glad you're joining again. And we do have a really good presence in Florida. So I'm excited to highlight that a little bit later on. So just to really quickly go through everything we do, because here's the thing, like most people think our company name is Tree Plotter, and that's really understandable because software is our bread and butter. But we do have an amazing services team that has done a ton of work in Florida, actually. So we do have an inventory team. So anytime a municipality, an HOA, maybe not as much HOAs, but certain groups put out RFPs for inventories, that is something we have a team for who will go out and go tree to tree, taking that information down. And we have partnered with some groups in Florida so that there's a little bit more local expertise. But I will say our very own tree inventory director is located in the Boca Raton area. So we have a really strong presence there. Additionally, we do some GIS work. And for those of you that maybe that's not why you're here today, the big thing there is that when groups want to know more about tree canopy cover, the percentages, the land cover classification, we have a team that does that. And we also have a version of our software that does that as well in a way that's more understandable. Because truthfully, we have a lot of tech people at our company, but I'm not one of them. And I think what we've done is tried to make this data more digestible for folks. And then urban forestry consulting, again, that really comes back to, you gather canopy data, you gather inventory data. How are you putting that to use for maintenance? And I know for a lot of you, that's really more of the focus is that landscape maintenance. And that can go beyond trees. That can be, other gray assets, other smaller green assets, so annuals, perennials, shrubs, all of those things that come into play for your work, irrigation, so many different things. And so I won't, go into too much more detail with this second slide, but really, I like to make it very clear that our big role is we want to help with data and being able to make that data strategic and improve efficiency for the work that you're doing every day. So maybe my biggest theme today is that if you're doing work on the landscape and you're not including trees at this time, or you're not consulting on trees, there is a major opportunity there. And that's where I've seen a lot of folks who are just doing landscaping, they decide to come in and also do trees and add that side to their business. Because there's such a demand for what I would call an arborist on demand. So whether it's a municipality or whether it's like a private company, a private campus that needs that expertise as well as landscape maintenance for caring for their trees. And especially in Florida, with so many areas being affected by, hurricanes, natural disasters, those things, trying to plan ahead and then have a plan for recovery is really important. So I won't make you guys listen to any more about our services. I think most of that is pretty clear. A couple of the big things that I know it sounds really basic, but the groups I have come to me that are more in landscaping that want to learn more about working with trees is, okay, how are you actually taking an inventory? What does that include? How are you pricing it? Those kind of things. And so, even though there's mobile opportunity out there now for, and we're kind of looking into it ourselves, mobile opportunity to take tree inventories, there is nothing that will replace being able to be on the ground, measure that tree, look at its condition, and identify the species. And so, in a lot of your situations, and I'll be curious to hear a little bit more, I see groups getting into more like HOA inventories, again, private campuses, and needing a tool that's going to make mapping easier for folks that are not, like into GIS or mapping software, things like that. And that's really where we come in. I think it's really important. Henry had mentioned about like having standards and those qualifications. And we have built in a couple of modules into our software as well that help us to stay on it's not a pun. I didn't stay on track with the tree risk assessment qualification module that we do have, so that we're following industry standards through ISA. And for those of you that aren't familiar with ISA, it is International Society of Arboriculture. So just want to make sure I point that out. Additionally, this is something that I want to point out because there is a free resource for all of the municipalities in Florida. And I'm going to have this link at the end. But it's been about 1.5 years ago that we created a statewide app for Florida so that every city could see their canopy cover. So they can go in and see the percentage of the area that is urban tree canopy, the areas that, let's see, like shrub cover, water cover, things like that. This is a free tool that we created and is hosted by the Florida Forest Service. So we do a lot of really cool projects with them. That's one thing that's going to be up that you can actually view potentially for your own projects or just insight for trends, because within that, we did an analysis of canopy change. So you'll be able to see areas that have gained canopy, that have lost canopy, and check things out that way. So I think the only other thing I want to mention here is that with the fact that you guys are out in the field advising folks on like what to do next. So you're evaluating their landscape, you're giving them ideas of what they should do next and what work you can do for them. I think the big thing to point out here is that in the software, we have a couple of new tools that actually pull a plan together or even give them a baseline of what they can actually look at for, a baseline assessment. So I'm going to pull that up when we actually get to a demo of the software. And that'll be just really interesting to show you guys how we're trying to build the data into long-term planning. For some of you out there too, when it comes to development and tree preservation, things like that, we do ordinance reviews, things like that. But what we've done in the software to help folks like yourself do that same work on your own is we have a tree protection zone and a root protection zone, or critical root zone, so that you can actually give recommendations of, are you building too close to a tree? Will that tree be okay? And I think right now that's one of the big themes we're seeing is how can you have success working with developers while trying to still have a compromise on tree preservation. And a lot of that comes through ordinances. So again, I mentioned this earlier, we have two main softwares. So tree plotter inventory is where you're going to see point by point trees. You can come in and add them. Or if you have existing data that you've already mapped with latitude and longitude, we can bring those in as well. Additionally, we can add other layers. So like, let's say you want to track your shrubs separately, or your amenities. So anything from park benches to gray infrastructure to irrigation. We're very tree focused, but we can handle assets essentially of any kind. And you'll see that in action. And then canopy, again, I'm not really going to go over that today because it's a little bit out of what I think you guys would be interested in. But we do have a canopy software that allows us to go in, interact with the canopy data, and see canopy percentages at essentially any kind of division you want. So like say you want to see canopy percentage at the parcel level, if you're a municipality, again, you can go in and see those trends and interact with the data without having to be a pro working with raw canopy data. And so I think one of the big things I want to jump to before I actually show the software, we're getting really close, so stick with me, is that we have extra tools in the software that can be added. So really cool thing here is that with the offline collector, if you're doing work in an area that maybe doesn't have the best reception, we do have that capability. So you can check out an area, take inventory, update those trees, update the other assets you're managing, and that will show up in the software. And that'll make a little more sense when I actually pull it up and show it. Additionally, one of the big ones, especially for HOAs and municipalities, are the eco benefits. So as you enter tree information, we can actually come in and quantify carbon storage, stormwater runoff, reception, as well as like air pollution that's been prevented. So that's one thing you'll see in action as well. And I know sometimes that can feel a little cheesy, but I know for a lot of groups that can help be a push for what you're trying to do. Two other big ones, because I'm not going to go through every single one here, is the advanced risk assessment. So those of you that are ISA track certified, we do have an add-on for that particular form so that you can go in, fill it in field by field, and create a report right out of the software instead of using the form they have and having it be separate. Again, development survey, that will kind of be around the tree protection zone and critical root zone. We can map that out. So, you can have that data when development's happening and you're on one side or the other. One other big thing I wanted to point out is that we do, like I said earlier, we have a really strong presence in Florida. Now, a lot of it is municipality wise, but I will say that the private industry is growing, and this is not a comprehensive list. I think one of my favorite examples that I wanted to show in here is the Amelia Island HOA had hired Cadence landscape architects to come in and do an inventory for them of their HOA. In this instance, it worked out that Cadence used the software, collected the data, and then Amelia Island decided, you know what, we want to manage this inventory beyond this initial data collection that Cadence did. And so essentially what happened is they decided to get their own tree plotter, manage through there, and even work with, contractors, folks through the software to keep their trees, keep the information up to date and keep up to date with the maintenance of their trees. There's another consultant in here as well who joined us not too long ago. But again, just this idea of keeping this in the back of your mind as additional services you could offer to just include more green assets. So what I'm actually going to do is I am going to jump to the software. I'll share my screen once I actually have that. And forgive me because I kind of have a cold. I wasn't feeling very good the last couple of days, but still worked out today. So go ahead and share this guy. So this is the fun part. However, I want to preface this with, as I go through the software, I want you guys to ask questions because I know some of you maybe aren't like the normal group I would talk to. And so if you have certain questions about capability, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And I will try to touch on all of those. So first big thing when it comes to the software is that we are web-based. So in other words, whether it's your cell phone, tablet, desktop, computer, anything like that, as long as you have a browser, you can put in your unique link for your tree plotter software, come to this page and log in. The cool thing about this is that you as an admin can create as many logins as you want and set different permissions. So like you as an admin can do everything. If you want to put limits on, say, colleagues that you work with, or you even want to give a view only access to a client to show them information on the map, you can do that. There's a lot of flexibility that way. And the way that we do that is that over here in the legend, you'll notice that there's a whole list of different projects. We'll call it that. And essentially, each of these is what we call a client site. So each of these has its own inventory and work zones. You can have, again, we have different levels of the software, but we try to make this, as self-configurable as possible. So for any of these clients, I always seem to have a favorite. We can look at the details of this client and you can create whatever fields you want. So that's something that can be done on your end. We can always help. We've got a great support team, but beyond the client information, we can go in and actually load the individual trees in that client site. I'm going to take a drink. So in here, this is all information that has been collected. So let's just pretend you're doing an inventory for a client. There's a couple of ways we can do this. And a lot of this is going to depend on the level of accuracy you need. So I would say with most like urban projects that we work with, where you can see a distinction of trees a little better, using the by map function will work best, which means I can drop a point on the imagery. It's going to take the coordinates and that tree is mapped. On the other hand, and I try to make this as not confusing as possible, the GPS is for if I have a group that says we need this to be survey type accuracy, it needs to be sub meter, sub centimeter. Oftentimes what we will do is we suggest that they use a separate GPS to pull from. So if I were to hit GPS right now, it would come above my house because that's where my computer is. What we often work with groups, and I actually have an example of a, what should we, what is the right word? Of a private consultant in Florida who just recently purchased a Juniper tablet, which is like a rugged tablet. So it's got a really good GPS, but it also has mobile browsing. So he can do everything in one. If not, say you have an iPad, you can connect that to your GPS through Bluetooth. And when you click by GPS, it will pull from that separate GPS device. So hopefully that makes sense. It all kind of just depends on that level of detail you need to go to. And Sean or Henry, if there's questions, please let me know because I can't see anything right now in that
Yes, there is
chat.
actually. We have a
Yeah.
question from Patrick Hanna. Hello, Patrick.
Yeah.
It says, can you compile data from multiple inventories to make specific profiles for individual tree species?
Yeah, so essentially what we can do, so like you'll notice I'm in a particular client site right now and I can run a filter to filter out like certain species and such. If you want to, you can actually go back to all of your project sites that you've done inventories for and run a filter there so that you can filter for certain traits, species, conditions across all of the inventory data you have. I'm hoping that's what he was getting at. Let me know if not.
Yep, that answered the question.
Great, great. Good question. Good question. And I'll go back in here and I'm just I'll drop a tree really quick and then show you guys like really essentially the medical chart. That's kind of what we call it for the trees. So this is where all of the information will live. Couple big things to keep in mind is that we allow you to add pictures of that tree. We also have a really nice species list for the region of the country that you're in. We're also international. So we try to build that list to start so you're not starting from scratch. And then you can edit it from that point. But you know, if I were to come in here and click that, it's going to automatically pull in that Latin name. We can go down to genus, family. A lot of those things can be automated in the software.
So this brings, I can have two questions actually.
Yeah.
That I think Patrick's question and then your later comments made me think of, which is in regard to, let's say you're in an area where there's no internet connection, and you had mentioned, you know, being able to do the offsite, no Wi-Fi, no. The device you're using would be, I guess, a tablet of some kind, an iPad or some kind of a tablet, and you have the software on that tablet, and then you can come back and connect when you're basically in front of your computer, and it brings everything in. Can you then compile all that data, basically like trees with the numbering, the species, the sizes, the condition, the photos, and then export that as a PDF or something like that?
Yeah, so we have a couple ways you can do it. So all of that data can be exported as either a CSV, a shapefile, or DXF for AutoCAD. If you're like really wanting it in a PDF, my recommendation would be to look at that data in the table format that we offer. And you can actually go ahead and export this. And what I would do is like set it up how you want it, set the columns up because you can set the view, put that to a CSV, edit it, and then save it as a PDF. Like I know that's a couple of steps, but that's going to be the best way to make sure that data is in the format you want it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Let's see here. So again, go back in here. And a couple of big things here. So we can track, you know, and maybe that's one thing here I should say too. I should take a step back. I always get going here. But what we can do is we've got a trees layer, but we also can do a zones layer so that if you don't want to track something point by point, you can track it with a polygon. So you can draw an area and track maintenance information rather than having to plot maybe every single annual, and do it by area. And I'll show you what that looks like too. Big things to think of in here, especially for this group, is that we do keep track, of course, of general management in here. So these are fields that we automatically have, their default, but terminology and the fields you use can be changed to fit the things that you actually do. And tracking information, I'm getting all going here. But one of the things that's really cool, especially for the private groups we work with, is that the different work tasks can be listed. They're put into a work category, and then we can set costs for them. So anytime that you assign work to a tree or a plant, you can have that task spelled out here and either have a fixed cost, or if it's based on trees, we can have it set by the diameter of that tree. The big idea is that by the end of, say you've done an inventory, you've marked what these trees need, you can come back and see exactly what needs to be done and potentially what that job might cost. And I think that's a really important distinction to make, is that we can price we can price these tasks, but we're not like an invoicing software or customer relationship management. We're really just based on the task. And it's very like straightforward that way. So one other big thing that I mentioned earlier, and actually before I move on to that, the work records function in here is where we actually come in and assign work to either like one individual asset, or we can create a group of assets that have work assigned to them. The cool thing here, just putting this into maybe more of like a story situation. Let's say you do an inventory for an HOA, and at some point they decide we want to keep you on for regular maintenance moving forward. What we can do is, like, when you come in and put your recommendations in, you can complete those tasks and then decide if you want to set future tasks so that you can plan to follow up with folks, keep an eye on their trees, say there's injections that need to happen every couple years or plant health care. You can keep track of those items in here even beyond completion. So all of those tasks, when they are completed, go into the work history for that tree or asset. Again, every layer, every asset that you have is going to have this same fundamental workflow that you're seeing here. And any changes made on any of this data, whether for good or for bad, you can micromanage who does that, when things are changed, and make sure you're able to keep an eye on things that way.
We have a question from John Harris.
Yeah.
And, he put in a sort of a two-parter, so I'll read the first part, but the question is the second. So he says, easy to use tree report pages that print PDF for each tree with data and photos. We use this in some of our reports using tree plotter in our projects. Ask Rachel to show an example of the tree report page, please.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So with all of this tree data that you have the option to come in and look at a few different kinds of reports. So in here, we've got a few different areas to look at. So if you want to look at the work records, which means the work that's actually been done on your trees, where your time has gone, we can look at a work records detail. Additionally, if we only want to see a report based on our trees, we can do a tree report. And I'll pull up what these look like because these do come out as PDFs. So thank you for bringing that up. I'll show you first. Let's look at a work records report. Hopefully that comes through for you guys. What it will do is all the data you've inputted, it's going to keep track of those work records. And if you've assigned cost, it will keep track of those. If you track your hours, again, the data is all as good as what you enter. It will come in here and break down specifically what work categories you've spent most of your time on, what work tasks you've spent most of your time on, as well as providing some like charts to show exactly what you're spending your time on. So this is something that could be really valuable, like maybe at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, of being able to go back and just assess like what's going on, I suppose, with your business and like where your efforts should go when it comes to outreach to potential clients and that kind of information. And I'm actually gonna click out of here and I'll open up one more report. And this is a lot more basic. So if I go ahead and run this report with one tree per page, it's literally gonna go tree by tree. And I want to preface this by saying that these reports we have are customizable, but that has to be done on our end. So like if you know the layout of the reports that you like to use, we can help you configure this to have the correct fields or even have text fields in here so that if you want to be able to put explanations in certain areas, you can do that. And I wish I'd had a really good example of one that we had customized, but I believe it's in a different demo app. So I'll leave that alone. But this hopefully kind of just gives you a feel of what that looks like. Additionally, on that same point, so we can come in and actually look at charts and graphs based on tree information. So like if we want to look at tree diversity, it's going to go ahead and auto calculate and create these graphs for me. I can look at it as a bar chart. I can also look at it in tabular form. So again, we try to make analysis more efficient, easier for you to do. And I'm sure other questions will come up, but I think the only other thing I want to mention on this side of reporting, we have this really new cool tool called Tree Management Insights, where based on the data that you have entered, we do this quick overview. And I guess let me make my screen big again. We do this quick overview of the trees that have been collected. And then we do a comparison of the inventory to the industry recommendations for tree diversity and tree size distribution. So you can see like we've got the 10, 20, 30 rule in here. If those of you that haven't heard of it, it's really that like your inventory should be no more than 10% of any one species, 20% of any one genus, or 30% of any family. And so again, it's never going to be perfect, but this at least kind of helps you when it comes to like what kind of trees should be planted or what kind of recommendations as a consultant should you be making. Same thing goes with tree size distribution. And I know this is a little bit more at the municipal level, but again, it's a way for you to see like, okay, are the trees in our city like all way too old? Do we need to be planting a bunch of young ones? How can we kind of even this out? And that really comes down to, again, the management of your trees.
I have another question from Patrick. It says, does your report feature export in Word so you can customize on your own and have the program just focus on the hard data?
So we don't have anything that exports to Word, I think everything would either have to be like the reports go out as a PDF, otherwise the data can go out in table format to then be used in like, creating that table and putting it into a Word report. We get that request a lot. And it's not something that our developers are working on yet. But I get that question a lot.
Cool, that works. I mean, if it goes in a table, then, you can work with that, I guess. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah. And that's why like we have that exporter tool, but the reason I kind of like this view for trees is that you can like come in and actually set what fields you want to show and what order they go in. So there's a good chunk of things you can do in here to ensure that when it exports, it's almost exactly what you need. On that same point, I get a lot of pictures about maps. And the cool thing is that any view we see in here, you can come in and add labels. You can come in and you can draw on there. We can come in and print from this from this very area. And this is one where we actually can pull it out as a PDF. So again, there's different ways you can use that in your reports, but there's a lot of functionality within the map part of this as well. And maybe one thing that I don't know, I obviously am in this software all the time. There's certain things I really, really like. One of them is if I have, let's say you have a client that wants to know like your progress on an inventory, or maybe they want to know exactly what 3 trees you're referring to when you're discussing with them. The cool thing is that we can run a filter and set a map scenario so that when I create a link, it will take them to exactly what you're talking about on the map, what trees, what assets you're talking about on the map with just the clicking into that map scenario. So that's really handy as well. Now, additionally, one of the things that comes up all the time, especially with the private consultants that I work with, is that we do have a reference layer importer so that if there are property boundaries, if there are municipal boundaries, whatever kind of boundaries, if you have that in a shapefile or a CAD file, we can import that in here so that you can turn those boundaries on or off on the map and have that guidance of, okay, is this tree actually within the area I need to inventory? Is this tree my responsibility? There's so many reasons why that reference layer importer is used and why it's so important. So that was something that came up with Amelia Island. We made sure to have the outline of that particular HOA so that the landscape architect was actually collecting trees in the correct areas and none outside of that area.
I actually have another question.
Yeah.
So let's say, as somebody working for a municipality, you need to go out to to a site, to a property, right? And there's quite a few trees, and you take your little tablet out there, and you're basically starting from scratch. And so you want to identify these trees. Do you think you could do like just a quick demonstration of what that might look like in terms of the user, using this for the first time and kind of like what that entails in terms of like adding good data that you can then later use for whatever purposes, whether it's a report or something else that you might need?
Definitely. So like let's start from the basics here. So a couple of things on that note is that with municipalities, sometimes they want community engagement and they want data to be visible to a certain point. We can hide certain fields and allow folks to see data. Like right now, even not logged in, potentially be able to see data. With our private folks, most of the time, of course, they want to keep it private. So we create that login for them. So you're going out to the field. This is an area that you know is going to have either Wi-Fi or you've got cell service, you've got reception. You're going to log in. And then ultimately, what we can do, and why don't I just, let's just pick. You can type in the address, the city, anything like that of the project that you're going to be working with. And then this is where we actually come in to add that project site. So since I'm in the client sites layer, when I click add, it's going to go to add a client site, not a tree. So I'm just going to randomly drop this one. We're going to call it just put that general information in here. And then I'm going to actually go into that project. So we're in the trees layer. And this is where we'll have to hit add to start adding some trees. So big distinction to make. If you are in an area that has a Google Street View, you can drop a point and see that street view. Now, if we're in a park, again, if there is no street view, you're not going to see anything. But just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and let's zoom in. I'm going to drop one down for maybe this palm right here. And this is where, again, we have so many fields in this demo app, but you're going to have to decide exactly what fields you want to collect. And really the biggest ones to note is the species. Species identification is so, so important. So I'm going to come in here. Forgive me, because I don't know palms very well, you guys. I'm going to just call it that. Some of you might be laughing at me right now if those don't live there, but we're going to go ahead, call it. We'll just say that it's in fair condition. We can take some pictures if we want. If there's anywhere in here where you want to keep track of land use or even keep track of like, if there are clearance conflicts, so like if there's utilities in the way, we can keep track of those as well. But the cool thing is, and I know I'm getting a little off topic here, but the cool thing is if I click that one and go to Street View, it should pull that tree up for me, seeing it right from the street. And that's going to be super helpful for the better you can plot these trees, the better when you go out to do that work, you're not confused about maybe which tree in someone's yard they're referring to for you to look at. And beyond just the regular tree data, the management is where you're going to come in and mark if that tree needs anything particular, any particular treatment, pruning, plant healthcare. Again, there's a lot of stuff in here, but we try to make this as customized to how you label your work, the terminology you use as possible. The other couple things is if you, oh gosh, I think this is through CTLA, there is an appraisal module for trees, and we have brought that calculation into our software as an add-on. So as you fill out certain fields, it's going to give percentages, calculations, so that by the very end, you've got that total, you've got that information for that particular tree, and it's kept in one place. Same thing goes for the track that I mentioned earlier. As you fill out all the different fields for each part of the tree, eventually you get to the end and it's going to give you that overall risk rating. And then it will even create a PDF track report for you for that tree. And ultimately, all of that analysis you've done, doesn't matter what level of detail, the action items come from adding a work record to that tree. So essentially, a work record is a work task. And if we want to add work to that tree, we can come in here, keep track of whatever information we want, and either assign it to someone internally, or if you're contracting with someone, create a contractor login so that they can only see work that's assigned to them. So I know I went over a lot of different things, but hopefully that kind of shows a general idea of how adding a tree goes and then just managing that data from that point. And I know I have, oh, let's see here, about 10 minutes left. I think the other huge thing, this is really important because a lot of regular asset management systems that aren't based around a living thing, like a tree that's changing and evolving every year, we have an inspection function. The point of this is that every time you visit a tree, you make an inspection, you update the fields that you feel are the ones that need to be updated. And every time you do one of these inspections, you can assign work to this tree. And every time you've done an inspection, it will be kept in the inspection history. So it's going to show you every inspection, any changes to certain fields that you've made, so that you're never losing historical data on these ever-changing trees. And I think that is so important and something that lacks in a lot of just the general like city asset management systems that I've seen.
Awesome. I have two questions and I'm reading them. It looks like they may be similar. Oh, and then something wrong came in. Hold on. Give me 1 second here. So Patrick says, does this software estimate canopy loss percentage for a proposed site plan on high canopy coverage sites?
So we don't have any canopy data within Tree Plotter inventory. We do have a canopy software that if you came to us and said, we have this area of interest that we need to know the canopy percentage of, and maybe the change over the last 10 years, we have methodology and software to do that. And one of the things I'd encourage you to look at first, because it's free, oh boy, can I remember what it is? And I can make sure I share this with folks too. And it's going to take a second to load because it has almost, you guys almost have like 500 municipalities. And we did a canopy cover assessment for each one to the census block level, which is still pretty general, but it at least gives you an idea for your city of what kind of changes there's been. I'm just going to pick at random here, but this is what the canopy software looks like. So we're able to come in here. So again, it's more general, but we can do this down to a more detailed level, just depending on your area of interest. And maybe just to put it out there that like this project was so broad that we kind of had to keep it more simple, but we can do whatever boundary you want. So like say you've got a project area, we could take this down to the parcel level and look at canopy percentage by parcel. Essentially any boundary you have, we can run canopy statistics on them. It's just that that's a separate product software from the inventory software.
Okay, thank you. And then There's another question. It's very similar. It's more, it looks like individual. It just says, how about estimating individual tree canopy coverage that would be lost if the trees removed? And I'm assuming that would kind of fall into the same. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So I know this app maybe isn't the best example, but when we have like, right off the top of my head, like Jacksonville, Florida has this app for the city. And what you can do is you could almost reverse engineer this. So we can come in here and create a scenario to say, hey, we want our canopy to be like in this area, let's see here, it's 21%. Let's say we want it to be 30%. And we make some assumptions on mortality rate and the mature size of our trees. If I run that scenario, it's going to tell me how many trees to plant. So I think in the past, when I looked at this, let's say, you know, your assumption is that you're going to go from 30 to 25% canopy if certain trees are taken down. You could run this in reverse and see how many trees, because it'll give you like negative trees. So it'll say, you know, if you lose this many trees, it's going to affect canopy in this way. So again, there's a lot of nuance there, and there's a lot of information to pull that off, but that is one way we do that in the software. We also, like I mentioned earlier, the GIS team is really good with the data. So sometimes they'll run totally separate from software. They'll run growth scenarios to say, if you don't do anything with your trees, canopy percentage will likely do this. If you remove trees, if you add this many trees, if you're really aggressive, they can run scenarios that way. So that's kind of more on the consulting services side of things, but something that definitely has come up.
Rachel, we have only 3 minutes. Can you put your email in the chat so if somebody has some question can reach out to you?
Yeah, let me go back and actually share the slide that I have for that. But yes, please do reach out to me.
And then I know we're winding down here. I actually had 2 more quick questions. So one, if you could maybe, I don't know if there's different price levels or scale in terms of how that it works, or if it's a monthly or annual or one time, or if there are options. And then secondly would be, I could see myself needing a little bit of guidance, especially in the beginning, right? And so what support looks like, how is that? Is it just through email, or is there an actual representative you can get on the phone, or how does that work?
Yeah, all great questions. And with the inventory software, we are subscription based. It's an annual fee that's all paid up front. It cannot be spread. It's all just done at one time. And what we do to get you really comfortable and using the software is that we do have onboarding and training that happens right when your app is delivered. We usually split that up into so many sessions depending on how advanced the app is. And you'll have support folks, and then you'll have a customer success rep who sticks with you through the life of your subscription. So they're kind of your Yoda, and then support, of course, they're there for the beginning, but they're also available by phone or email during the whole subscription. And we have a really great support site that has tutorial videos, articles, some really like great self-help stuff. So we really pride ourselves on our support team. I'm sure everyone says that, but that is something that I do believe has set our software apart from others in the industry.